Well, let's talk a little bit more about analyzing an individual's income. What documents do you like to start with?
Again, I'm going to go back to some documents that we've talked about a number of times. I'm going to want to see the income tax returns, the W-2 wage statements, and of course the current pay stubs. I like to get a history of those, usually 3 to 5 years, and I sort of use my judgment as to what period of time to look at, but I like to look at that history so I can get an understanding of how the numbers have changed over time.
And what do you do with these documents?
Well, first, I'm going to match up the wage figures between the various documents. So I want to see, does the pay stub match the W-2? Does the W-2 match the income tax return? And if any of these don't match, I obviously need to find out why. I also want to see if there's any information about different types of pay. So particularly on the pay stub, is there something showing maybe a bonus versus the regular salary or things like that?
And what other items on the tax return are in particular interest to you?
There are lots of line items on the tax return that can provide interesting information. I like to look at interest income and dividend income. These can help me identify bank and brokerage accounts that I may not have known about before. I do look for taxable refunds or credits. One of the things that I've run into is one of the spouses having an unusually large amount of income taxes withheld from their paycheck, thinking that the divorce will be done before tax return time comes around, and that spouse may get that very large refund and deprive the other spouse of some of those funds. I look at alimony paid or received for a previous marriage and try to determine how that's being paid and whether it needs to be factored into the current divorce. I look for the business and real estate holdings, whether there are any partnerships, S corporations, other business interests that we should be looking at and applying the information from that previous chapter that we talked about on business interests. I look at the capital gains again to see whether there may be brokerage accounts or other investments that we weren't aware of. I look for distributions from IRAs, pensions, other types of retirement accounts to see if there are some accounts that we weren't previously aware of. I want to look to see if there's been unemployment compensation or Social Security income. Any sort of income, we want to try to determine if there is a potential claim to that for the other spouse. And so at every point when I'm looking at this information, I'm looking at the history, I'm looking at changes over time, and I'm asking myself, do the numbers on the front of the tax returns make sense? I think something that sometimes happens with accountants is they take those numbers at face value and don't think beyond them. They accept what's on the tax return and just go with that. I'm a real big fan of critical thinking and looking a little bit deeper and asking more questions about the numbers and trying to understand them before accepting that they are correct and accurate.